Hello, welcome back to another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric. I did 11 years in prison, and I talk about prison stuff. Today, I'm going back to the time I was in El Dorado. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about what was going on in 2009 and continue my journey through the prison system. So in 2009, late 2008 into 2009, I lost my infirmary job. I lost my father. There's some other stuff going on, and that's what I'm talking about today. Be sure to like and subscribe, and here we go. All right, so in my last video talking about my time in El Dorado, I talked a little bit about my buddy AB and what went down with him. If you haven't watched that, I'll put a thing up so you can go check it out. But I was working in the infirmary, and I spoke a little bit about that before, but I'm going to recap. So when I worked in the infirmary, I was a porter. And my job required me to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was always there on time. And the moment I got there, I would go take these ice bins over to the RDU side of the prison, and I'd fill them up with ice and bring them back for the guys in the infirmary. And the guys in the infirmary were often very sick. El Dorado was where they sent all the cancer patients in the Kansas prison system. So if you had cancer, it was bad. Chances are you were going to end up in El Dorado. So I'd do the stuff with the ice. I would clean the tables and the phones and stuff in the day room. And after that, when everybody woke up, I would go around and clean cells for those guys. And when I was finished cleaning cells for those guys, I would sit with them and kind of spend time with them. A lot of those guys were terminal, so they didn't have family coming in. A lot of them didn't have visitors in general, and they didn't have contact with other inmates on the yard because a lot of them were undergoing chemo and radiation therapy, and cancer treatment in general, or having cancer in general, oftentimes attacks the immune system. So you got these guys with real low immune systems, and they couldn't be around other inmates on the yard. So they didn't leave the infirmary. I might have been the only outside guy they saw in the infirmary for, that day. So I would sit with them, I would hang out, I would talk to them, listen to their stories. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm a big fan of stories. So giving those guys my time and being able to listen to their stories and being a part of their time was very meaningful to me. And, it's something that's very, very hard to describe. And I'm honored that those guys let me be a part of their lives. It was very, very cool. And the sad thing is, you build connections with these guys, and a lot of them were terminal, so I knew they were going to die, or there was a good chance they were going to die. But even then, when they did pass away, it was pretty rough, What led to me losing my infirmary job was a few different things. We had a sergeant that worked back in the infirmary, Mrs. King. I didn't like her at all. She was a real piece of work. And her husband was the head of the black suits. And, the black suits are kind of like the goon squad, or the special security team is their official name in Kansas. And they go around and perform shakedowns, and they respond when there's a riot or a big fight on the yard or something like that, or when they have a cell extraction to do down in SIG. But if you had a problem with Miss King, she could send her husband and his cronies to come harass you. Now, the thing about working in the infirmary, a lot of guys would come in on crisis watch. And it could be guys from Supermax, guys from Gen Pop, the whole whatever. But a lot of guys who are in Supermax for a long time, or in segregation for a long time, they start to lose it a little bit. And some of those guys will start playing with their own urine and their own feces. And, it's pretty gross, I know. And I don't mean to offend anybody's sensibilities, but it happens. And there was a guy who came in on crisis watch, and he smeared feces all over his cell. He pissed on the floor. He, threw his tray on the wall. So his cell was an absolute mess when he left. And Miss King asked me to clean that up. Now, when you first come into DOC in Kansas, you go through orientation, and they tell you flat out, you don't have to clean up bodily fluids. If an officer asks you to clean up bodily fluids, tell them no. The reason why is that's a legal liability for the Department of Corrections. You know, if an inmate has AIDS or something like that, or HIV positive, or some other sort of disease, and you're exposed to those bodily fluids, then, you know, you have a potential lawsuit on your hands. The other aspect of it is, you know, if you're not hazmat trained or don't have any sort of hazmat certifications, I don't think you're supposed to really handle, you know, biohazards, bodily waste and stuff like that. Anyway, Miss King wanted me to clean out this cell. And she was one of the officers that antagonized this dude and resulted in him tearing this cell apart and smearing it with feces and other fluids. And she wanted me to clean this up, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I was pretty knowledgeable with the law library and the IMPPs at the time. The IMPPs are the policies which govern Kansas prisons. They're the rules, pretty much. And I quoted the IPP to her, where inmates do not have to handle bodily waste or bodily fluids. And so she told me flat out, she said, if you're not going to do it, you're fired. Go back to your living unit. And at this time, I had moved out of Tony's cell. I talked about living with a guy named Tony Hunt for a while. I had moved out of his cell, and I had moved into U-Dorm. U-Dorm was an open dorm, between 100 and maybe 120 people, maybe more. I don't really know the exact count. But all the inmates who were doing good things in the prison, people who were working in the infirmary, or guys who were maintenance, stuff like that, they would get moved to the U-Dorm unit because it was air conditioned, you had microwaves, it was a little bit nicer. So, you know, they tried to give guys who were doing good jobs a good living unit. And so that's where I was living. And I went back to my unit, and my unit team manager over U-Dorm was also the unit team manager over the infirmary. And you have a unit team manager, and then right underneath the unit team manager, you have a unit team counselor. And my unit team counselor was Miss Piles. And I went and spoke to her about the incident. And she said, you know what, you're in the right. You don't have to do that. You know, just take the rest of the day off and go to work in the morning. You know, I'll handle it. So that's what was done. But that night, Miss King sent her husband and his goons to come tear my cube apart, because in U-Dorm you live in these cubicles. And they went through all my stuff, threw all my stuff out of my locker onto my floor, walked on my family pictures, walked on my sheets and blankets and stuff like that, and just really tried to harass me. And, you know, whatever happened, I went to work the next day. Now, they did write me up. I had a hot pot that boiled, but right before this happened, they had a mass shakedown in U-Dorm. Just about every inmate over there had a hot pot that boiled. A hot pot is just basically a little electronic vessel that heats up water for you. And we would modify those hot pots so they would actually boil water. And everyone who was in U-Dorm had really good jobs. A lot of them had private industry jobs. They were making minimum wage because they were working for a different company. They weren't working for KDOC. They were actually working for a private industry that would come into the prison. Anyway, they all had really good jobs. They did good things, and so they could not afford to lose their job over a write-up. So everybody who got caught with a hot pot that boiled got written up for a Class 2 contraband. And when King got me with my hot pot, this happened the next day after that mass shakedown, when King hit me for my hot pot, he wrote it up as a Class 1 dangerous contraband. So I went and I hollered at the unit team and I said, look, I had the hot pot. I knew it boiled. I knew it was against the rules. But look, everybody else just got hit for the same thing. You gave all of those guys Class 2s. Can you amend this to a Class 2 from a Class 1? And she said, yeah, I'll do that. So that was all good. The other thing that was going on when I was back there, I was the only porter back there. They fired the other porter because he was hiding razor blades in the laundry room. And they were trying to make me work more than 40 hours a week. They wouldn't let me go to my religious call-outs or anything like that. And that's a constitutional right in the United States. You have the right to practice your religion. And so not letting me go to my religious appointments and my religious groups and stuff like that, that was a bad thing. And at the time, the IMPPs said that you weren't allowed to work an inmate more than 40 hours a week without paying for the extra days, which, you couldn't work them more than 40 hours a week without paying them for the extra days, which in my case, I think it was 60 cents a day. Or you couldn't work them more than 40 hours a week against their will. It was I think it was like a state-created civil liberty or something like that. Anyway, so I brought this up to Miss Marlette because she was trying to make me work all that time. Miss Marlette was a unit team manager over the infirmary. And she tried to fight with me about it, and then I went above her head. I went to administration, filing paperwork. And officers really don't like when you file paperwork. Officers, administrations, support staff, whatever. I don't care if it's a unit team or if it's a security officer. They don't like it when you put paperwork on them. And Miss Marlette kind of got mad. And at first, everything was okay. She hired a couple of new guys, but she started slowly trying to get me out of the infirmary. And, this new guy that she hired two new guys. One was this young white cat, and he was in prison because he was going real fast on his motorcycle, and he had his girlfriend on the back, and he wrecked the motorcycle. His girlfriend died, and so he got 2 years for involuntary manslaughter. The other dude was real cool. He was an older black dude, really polite. I got along with that guy really great. But this young cat who killed his girlfriend, I didn't care much for. And he walked around the infirmary one day with Miss Marlette, and he's like, oh, this guy's not doing his job. He's not doing this. He's not doing that. He's not doing that. You need to get him out of here. Now, this young cat that I didn't really like, in addition to telling on me, because you don't go to a staff member and say, he's not doing this, he's not doing that. He had an agenda. He wanted to be back there in the infirmary with those nurses. He was trying to pull a nurse. Pulling a staff member basically means that you're going to try to romance them and make them feel like they're in a romantic or intimate relationship with you, so you can either have sex with them or get them to bring dope into the facility or something like that. So that's what this guy was doing. He was also trying to get access to the med room that was back there in the infirmary so he could steal drugs out of there, take them back to the cell house, and then sell them. So he's trying to edge me out of the picture anyway. But any of the inmates who were back there in the infirmary would have told you that I was the best porter they had back there. I was always there when one of those dudes were in trouble, needed their cells cleaned, needed their bedding changed, anything. You're on chemo, you might throw up on yourself, you might shit on yourself, whatever. And it can be real humiliating. And so it wasn't even a thing. I'd built a rapport with those guys. I was their friend. I wanted to be there for them. And so I was always willing to help out. And now I have this young punk trying to, get me fired. And he did succeed in getting me fired. They laid me in. And I was still living in U-Dorm, but this young cat was living over in East A Cell House. And he messed up, man. Because in another video, I mentioned my workout partner, Lewis Galloway. This big mixed race dude who could probably bench a Volkswagen. He was huge. And he was quiet and he was polite, but you didn't want to mess with him because that dude would jack you up. But he's probably one of the most genuine people I met while I was down. But Lewis lived over there in that cell house, and this young cat, after he got me fired, one day he was walking through the gym with Marlette, and he tried to check me in front of the police. He said, "Hey man, someone said that you called me a rat and la-da-da-da-da," and tried to act tough. He's like, "I don't know if you know what I'm in here for, but I'm a killer." All right, cool it, bro. For one, don't try to check me in front of the police. For two, you killed your girlfriend because you were driving too fast and you got 2 years to do. Shut up. That was about the end of that interaction. He was like, all right. And then he went back to his cell house. I went back to U-Dorm. When he got back to his cell house, Lewis got word of what went down, and Lewis pushed up on that dude hard. Told that dude, "Hey man, you got a problem. We can go to the shower right now. Let's do it. If you keep up the way you're going, you're going to be paying rent to live in this cell house." And what that means, if you're paying rent to live in a cell house or to live on a run or something like that, that means you're being extorted. You're paying someone not to whip your ass. So there was that. But I lost my job in the infirmary, and they made me a disaide there in U-Dorm. Basically, I was pushing an old man around in a wheelchair, which wasn't a bad gig. I like helping people, so that was all right. But it didn't really last long. I got moved over to East Bay Cell House, funny enough, and they moved Loudmouth over to U-Dorm so he wouldn't be in the same cell house. And I moved in with a guy named Jerry. Jerry was really cool. I stayed on lay-in status. Lay-in means you don't have a job in Kansas prisons. And I stayed on lay-in status for a long time, and I didn't really feel like working for him after that. I put my heart and soul into that infirmary job. I met a lot of cool people, a lot of people I cared about, and then that was all just gone. But I kept going to yard. I was learning to play the bass, learning to play the guitar, working out regularly. So I was cool. I got my electronics when I had the infirmary job. They said I wasn't going to be able to get my electronics back for a while or my contact visits, but I talked to my unit team about it. I said, "Hey, I've been behaving. Let me get this stuff back." And I also completed my high school diploma, which they thought highly of that. So they gave me my visits back. They, gave me the ability to buy my electronics. So I got my TV and my radio and stuff, and I was cool, But then in July of 2009, my father passed away. And it was right around the time when I was starting to go to college. And I had just secured a job as an electrician, which I thought was super cool because my grandfather, my dad's dad, had been an electrician. So I felt like I was finally getting my life together. I had a real job, doing something my dad would respect. I was going to college, all this great stuff. And then one day my dad died. And I have a video about that. I can put it up and you guys can check it out if you want to. And that was a really rough time for me. So, but yeah, that concludes this video. That kind of concludes what was going on in my life at that time, late 2008, early 2009 in El Dorado, what it was like working in the infirmary and stuff. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. I love you all. I'm Eric. This has been another episode of From Prison to Streets. I will see you all later. Break these chains.